Next, we have the Honda NS400R. The NS400R was Honda's flagship two-stroke. As with the Suzuki, it was only built in 1985 and 86, but unlike the Suzuki, Honda went full bore on their 400. They wanted to dominate the home market with a faster 400cc bike than anyone else had, and the NS400R would produce a massive 72 horsepower at the crank. And although by the time that reached the rear wheel it was down closer to 60 horsepower, it was the most powerful 400cc motorcycle for many years. It was slightly heavier than the Suzuki at 163 kilos dry, and although 10 kilos might not sound like a lot, every pound or kilo mattered. Acceleration was officially down compared to the Suzuki at 13 seconds for a standing quarter mile, but I have seen 12-second times on bog standard machines that would refute that figure. Top speed was slightly down too, at 202 km per hour or 125.5 miles an hour, but this too was almost imperceptible. The full story is really one of specs. Although max torque was almost identical, Honda's 112-degree V3 engine always just felt like it had a little more grunt at the bottom end than the Suzuki. On a track, at whatever level, they were hard to separate, but on the road, the Honda won hands down. It was just more manageable and easier to ride for us mere mortals. You could feel the engine begin to come alive around 6,000 RPM, and by 7,000, the rush of power from that triple engine had become a surge. By 8,000 RPM, it was time to hold on for dear life, and you still had another 1,500 RPM on tap at that point. This wider, more usable power band than the Suzuki just made it an easier motorcycle for the average rider to ride fast. Honda were ahead of the game with the four-strokes. They had the history of the CB404 behind them and Honda's rich heritage of racing four-strokes, and it was 1983 that they released the first Honda CBR 400F, or the NC17 as it was known. With an air-cooled 399cc across-the-frame 4 engine that was descended from the CBX 400, it wasn't new tech. It was proven, but they pushed the performance of that engine to a whole new level. It would never compete with the two-strokes in racing, but on the street it could hold its own with most bikes through the twisties. Peak power of 58 horsepower came in at a stratospheric 12,300 RPM, and peak torque of around 36 Newton meters came in at 11,000 RPM. Those two figures alone should give you an idea of how much this motorcycle liked to rev. Dry weight was also up compared to the two-strokes, but at 175 kilos dry, it was as light or lighter than any of today's equivalents. 117 mile an hour or 186 kilometers an hour top speed meant the two-strokes were out of reach on top end. But the 0 to 100 kilometers an hour or 0 to 60 time of around 4.8 seconds meant until you were going over the speed limit, there was very little to choose between the CBR, RG and NS400s. Where the CBR was a clear winner was when it came down to comfort. This wasn't a purebred sports bike like the RG400. It was even more refined and usable than the NS400R. This was a motorcycle that epitomised the term a practical sports bike. Through the twisties, it was a joy, and if you kept it on the boil, it was a handful for all but the fastest bikes. 1986 saw the final year of the NC17, with 3 variants in naked form, a half-fed endurance version and the fully fed F3 endurance. But it also saw the introduction of a new breed of CBR. This time the all-new water-cooled CBR 400 was lighter and faster, It shared much of the styling of the jelly mold CBRs in the first year, but by 1987 the styling had evolved into a more race-bred style, and we got an extra R in the CBR 400RR. The red line was pushed up to 14,000 RPM, and changes came thick and fast, with the tri-arm and then the gull arm swing arms, and Honda's anti-dive fork system stiffened up the damping under braking, and the early 16-inch front wheel was replaced by a 17-incher. This motorcycle oozed class, with quality touches everywhere, and for us now, looking back, it is easy to see the dawning of the Fireblade. This is a bike that became known as the Baby Blade, but it was built a full 5 years before the bigger 900 blade was built. It was manoeuvrable, yet poised, and had predictable handling, but was sharper than any of its larger kindred. Rarely have I ridden a bike that is as flickable yet sure-footed as the CBR 400RR. In many ways, you could say that the baby Honda Blade is the motorcycle that made the Fireblade so good. Trimming weight wherever possible became an obsession with this bike. It was that philosophy that was carried forward into the 900 Fireblade project. The NC23 was replaced in 1990 by the NC29, and over the years the performance was pushed up until by 1998 it had a top speed of 135 miles an hour, which even now seems phenomenal for a 400cc bike. As well as the competition from other manufacturers, the CBR had to compete within the Honda lineup too. As well as the NS400R, the all-new VFR platform was under development, but the fact the CBR 400 lasted so long is a testament to how good these incredible bikes were. I have to talk about the Honda VFR and RVF 400. First built in 1986, the VFR 400 or NC21 had the gear-driven cams of its big brother, and despite it being ridiculously expensive over here, they had their die-hard fans. By 1988, we had the NC30, which is still held by some as the very best of the VFRs. The V4 engine makes the VFR 400 more complex mechanically, and although it is pretty bomb-proof, as an owner you are always worrying that if something goes bang, you will have much more to do than you would if it was an across-the-frame 4. Power delivery was distinct and smooth, maybe a little too smooth for some. It didn't have that band of power that the two-strokes did, and it didn't have that surge of the FZR 400. The excitement of the VFR didn't come from the engine, but from the bike's seemingly impossible ability to hold corner speed beyond the limits of all but the very best riders. In this respect, it had only one rival, and that was the FZR. Was it better? Well, now that is a question that comes down to personal taste. In 1984, we got the RVF 400R, or the NC35. In reality, the NC30 had been so good that this was more of a makeover than a redesign. The bike was effectively the same, but with the latest upside-down forks, a ram air system, and the styling of the new RC45. Was the RVF better? That is one of the most hotly contested questions in motorcycle history, and I will leave you to decide on that one. Power was around 60 horsepower, and top speed was in the region of 128 miles an hour, dependent on the gearing. But top speed is a stupid metric to judge any of these bikes. What they are all supremely good at is carrying that speed through the corners. The engine gives the Honda V4s a different feel to the others, and that means it will always have its fans. Did it warrant all the extra complexity that inevitably came from a V4 platform? I'm not so sure, but I am glad they made it. Anyway, that's it for today. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and as always I look forward to hearing your opinions in the comments. I will finish answering them all in time, but I have had a bit of a backlog. If you got this far and haven't already, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Subscribing does help a lot and means you get to find out first when our regular updates, news, views and other videos go out. Please share the videos with anyone you think will be interested too if you could. That is one of the things that helps us the most. It kicks the YouTube algorithm into gear and helps to get the channel out there to new viewers. For the best biker t-shirts and other merchandise made by bikers for bikers, you can visit the website or the Redbubble shop linked in the description below too. There are other exciting motorcycle adventures and other stories from the shed and beyond on the website, so why not grab yourself a cuppa and take a look around. Thanks for watching. I hope you get some great riding in, and remember, keep your spanners close and your keys even closer. Ride free, everyone! 21番三浦今ゴール